Now, what could James Brown teach us about being better mental performance practitioners? Now, hear me out on this one. Let's go back to 2014. The movie Get On Up is about James Brown. It was portrayed by the late, great Chadwick Boseman. Now, there's one scene that always stood out to me when I first saw it, and I always felt it was interesting being a former musician. But as a practitioner in the mental performance industry, I saw something relevant to what I do in my practice at Mind Body One. Now, in this particular scene, he asked one of the saxophone players, what instrument is this? And he points at a drum. He says, it's a snare. He's like, what type of snare? A snare drum. But he goes on to point to a guitar. He goes to point to the trumpets and the other sections. And he says, drum, drum, drum. They're all drums.
What's Mazio holding?
Drum, Mr. Brown.
Fellas, what's them shiny things y'all holding over there?
Drums.
Now we all got our drums.
Now, the point he was getting at is that each instrument has its own rhythm. And the theory is the beat needs to be with the drums and everything else follows along with the melody. But how James Brown saw it, it all could be the rhythm and it all could be the melody. And this was abstract, but you can see James Brown became one of the greatest legendary singers, considered the godfather of soul. Now, one of the rebuttals of the saxophone player was, it doesn't make sense musically.
But Mr. Brown, Clyde will be in a different time than the rest of the band. It doesn't work musically.
And he questioned that. And now you look at it as, well, it doesn't make sense. Why do it? And I'm going to bring it full circle how this makes sense with the mental performance industry. So James Brown looks at him and says,
How many hit records you got, sir?
and it wasn't necessarily to be petty or belittle him, but it made a sense that, yeah, you don't think it makes sense from a foundational or structural level, but obviously it works. And he asked the whole band, does it sound good? Everyone said, yeah. And then they started playing. Now, the point I want to bring to this in the mental performance industry, because if you follow me, you already know Mind Body One has a very out the box abstract way of approaching mental performance. So when it showed, is this a drum? Is that a drum? I look at that as the mental performance industry, because the typical vehicle or how practitioners implement their services, one-on-one coaching sessions, maybe group or team coaching sessions, and probably workshops. That's probably the three biggest methods, but the vehicle is still, I'm going to teach you a subject or teach you some skills, hear you out, help you fix some kind of performance issue. So that's generally what it comes down to. And I've consulted with many organizations, businesses and practices, as well as mentored interns. And I see that that frame of thought kind of stays in that box. Now, going back to what we do, everything's a drum. So in the same sense, you got to look at it as, okay, I can do direct to client services, whether it's a company, a team, an athlete, a workshop, but can I do things such as create apps, create tools, implement like cognitive training, do musical type implementations? There's all types of ways you can approach it from your skill set or talents. But if you're limiting yourself just to that one way, not only from a business standpoint, your revenue streams, but also the value you bring, because the name of the game is the more value you can bring, the more likeness you can get what you need to the clients. So using Mind Body One, we have something called sound thoughts and rap psychology. I used to make music in high school. I made hundreds of songs. I even tried to get signed to a record deal and I even got to perform with some actual major artists, but it didn't take off. But those skill sets stayed with me. And that actually helped me be good at speak on camera and doing all this other stuff. But all in all, that musical bug still was in me because I loved it for mental health reasons. It let me clear my thoughts. But I'm like, I'm not trying to get signed to a record deal anymore. So guess what? I said, let me put this music into practice. So I created sound thoughts where every mindset needs music. So these are beats and instrumentals that help you get in the zone or calm down or focus or whatever it may be. And we have very practical ways. And I'll show some of them, such as our blitz methods or other beats, like, you know, how people have lo-fi. We have those things too. But also with rap psychology, this was implemented to be a way to have a fun, interactive way to teach skills and add value. But it's music, and one we made using Dr. Huberman. He's a well-known neuroscientist. We sampled him, made a cartoon around it. And it was about dopamine. So these are just some different ways. That's a drum. That's mental performance training. But also we created apps. We have apps that are simply for everyday mental health, gives you a quick tip, has a journal, has videos to help you, has breathing drills. But we also have apps that do cognitive performance training like the Stroop test, working memory. But we also have mindset skills where you get trash talk in your ear or internal self-talk, distractions, things that make you have to focus and overcome in real time. But then we have apps like the concentration grid app that we took it further than the typical grid. We call this one grids, and it has different versions that goes beyond what every other grid does. So it's like, can you find other ways to be that drum? It may seem unorthodox. A lot of people ask, what do you do? I went to the ASP conference, which is the accrediting body for sports psychology, and the people I paid to be a vendor there couldn't figure out, what are you trying to get out of this? Are you selling something? And I told them no. And guess what I did at the 2024 conference in Las Vegas? I set up a podcast station, and I also did it in 2023. But basically, I set up a podcast station along with some of our tools and apps, and people could literally see in real time what we did, and also could sit down and talk to us. And I turned that into what? Content. I even got the head of performance at the UFC Institute, Forrest Griffin, a UFC Hall of Famer and former champion, to sit down with me. See how that can go further and just, hey, let's talk about some skills? No, the bigger your reach can be, the more people you can help. You got to get out of this one track minded way of thinking, not because you need to get millions of views. The likes and views don't mean anything. It's the reach you get. The more people can see this and get educated on how, one, important this is, but also get the skills that you provide, the better way you can serve. Take another example from McDonald's. Yes, McDonald's. Now, I don't want to talk about the food, but the business model. If you're familiar with the movie The Founder, another movie that exemplifies the story of the McDonald's brothers and Ray Kroc, who would go on to become the founder, he had a scene where someone told them,
You don't seem to realize what business you're in. You're not in the burger business. You're in the real estate business.
and this is how I see the mental performance industry. A lot of us don't realize we're not in mental performance training. We're in problem solving. And that looks so many different ways. And the way you can find those problems and solve them is the way you can get your revenue streams up and become an official in your niche or your industry under the mental performance umbrella. So going back to McDonald's, he told them, you're in the real estate business. And a lot of people don't know this, and maybe you do, but McDonald's is one of the largest real estate holding companies in the world, because in the contracts of the franchisees of the McDonald's restaurant, they have to rent from McDonald's. By proxy, all the revenue they make from selling burgers and fries and all that stuff pales in comparison to the rent they're getting every single month that's guaranteed as long as that business stands there. So having these innovative ways to think outside the box of the traditional industries you're in, that's something we call a blue ocean strategy. And I won't get too deep into this video, but we can talk more about it in future videos. But this is how you truly have outside the box thinking so you can help your population. So I want you to take this with you to find your drums, plural. What drums are you beating? Not just going to a session, not just doing a workbook or workshop. Find multiple drums so you can have that pace and flow and rhythm to get your client's mind right.